There are certain leaders in history who didn't just change their countries, they changed the direction of the entire world. Some ruled through fear, some ruled through propaganda, and some convinced millions of people that only they could restore a nation's greatness. But very few leaders rose as dramatically or fell as violently as Benito Mussolini. Before Adolf Hitler became the face of fascism, before Europe was consumed by World War II, there was Mussolini, a man who started as a poor blacksmith's son, then became a journalist, then a revolutionary, and eventually transformed himself into one of the most feared dictators in Europe. To millions of Italians, he looked like a savior. To the rest of the world, he became a warning. And in the end, the man who once stood proudly on balconies before cheering crowds would die hanging upside down in public humiliation. This is the rise and fall of Benito Mussolini. But before we continue, make sure you subscribe and turn on the notification bell. Because on this channel, we uncover the darkest stories in history, the rise of powerful empires, brutal dictators, and the events that changed the world forever. Now, let's begin. To understand Mussolini, you first have to understand Italy. Today, Italy is known for food, fashion, football, and beautiful cities. But in the late 1800s and early 1900s, Italy was struggling badly. The country was poor. Many workers lived in terrible conditions. Farmers were starving. Unemployment was everywhere. And millions of Italians felt humiliated because other European powers like Britain, France, and Germany were richer and stronger. Italy was technically united as one nation, but internally it was divided and unstable. Into this chaos, Benito Mussolini was born in 1883. His father was a blacksmith and a passionate socialist who hated the rich and despised authority. His mother was a schoolteacher who wanted her son to become educated and respectable. Young Mussolini grew up angry, rebellious, and extremely aggressive. He got into fights constantly. He was expelled from schools multiple times. At one point, he even stabbed another student during an argument. But despite his violent behavior, he was intelligent, very intelligent. He loved reading politics, philosophy, and revolutionary ideas. He admired powerful historical figures who dominated nations through force and charisma. Even as a young man, Mussolini believed something dangerous, that violence could be useful, and that belief would eventually shape his entire life. As he grew older, Mussolini became heavily involved in socialist politics. At the time, socialism was growing rapidly across Europe. Workers were demanding better conditions, better pay, and more political power. Mussolini became a fiery journalist and speaker. He was passionate, loud, dramatic, and incredibly persuasive. Crowds loved him. He could stand in front of thousands of people and speak with such intensity that audiences became emotionally overwhelmed. Soon, he became editor of a major socialist newspaper in Italy. And for a while, it looked like Mussolini would spend his life fighting for workers and socialist revolution. But then, World War I changed everything. When the war began in 1914, many socialists opposed it. They believed the war only benefited rich elites while ordinary people died. At first, Mussolini agreed, but suddenly he changed his position. He began supporting Italy's involvement in the war, believing war could transform Italy into a stronger and more powerful nation. This shocked his fellow socialists. To them, Mussolini had betrayed the movement. He was expelled from the Socialist Party, and that moment became a turning point, because Mussolini no longer saw himself as just a socialist revolutionary. He now wanted something bigger: power. Italy eventually joined World War I, and the results were disastrous. Hundreds of thousands of Italians died. The economy collapsed. Soldiers returned home traumatized. Factories shut down. Inflation exploded, and ordinary Italians became furious with the government. Even worse, many Italians believed their country had been cheated after the war ended. Italy fought alongside the winning side, but didn't receive the territories it expected. People called it a mutilated victory. National anger spread everywhere. Workers went on strike. Violence filled the streets. Communists threatened revolution. The government looked weak and helpless. And Mussolini saw an opportunity. In 1919, he created a new political movement, fascism. Now today, the word fascist is used constantly online. But back then, fascism was new. Mussolini promised strength, order, national pride, discipline, unity. He told Italians that democracy was weak, that endless political arguments were destroying the country, and that only a strong leader could save Italy. To many desperate people, that message sounded attractive, especially after years of chaos. Mussolini also created violent groups known as the Black Shirts. These men dressed in black uniforms and attacked political opponents, especially socialists and communists. They burned offices, beat critics, intimidated voters, and spread fear across Italy. But here's the terrifying part. Many wealthy Italians secretly supported them. Factory owners, businessmen, and conservative elites feared communism more than fascism. So they saw Mussolini as useful. They believed they could control him. That would become one of the greatest miscalculations in European history. By the early 1920s, Mussolini's popularity was exploding. He mastered propaganda before most politicians even understood its power. He posed dramatically for photographs. He gave emotional speeches. He presented himself as a fearless man of action. Strong, confident, decisive. Everything the weak Italian government was not. Then came the moment that changed everything. The March on Rome. In October 1922, thousands of black shirts marched toward the Italian capital, demanding power. Now here's what's fascinating. The march itself wasn't actually unstoppable. The Italian army could probably have crushed it. But the King of Italy, Victor Emmanuel III, feared civil war. So instead of stopping Mussolini, he invited him to become prime minister. Mussolini was only 39 years old, and just like that, he entered power legally. Not through full military conquest, not through revolution, but through fear, pressure, and political weakness. At first, many Italians believed Mussolini would restore stability. And honestly, in some ways, it looked like he did. Trains reportedly ran on time. Violent strikes decreased. Infrastructure projects expanded. National pride increased. Propaganda painted Mussolini as a genius leader working day and night for Italy. His image was everywhere. Schools praised him. Newspapers praised him. Posters praised him. Children were taught to worship him. He called himself Il Duce, meaning the leader. And slowly, democracy disappeared. Opposition parties were crushed. Critics were imprisoned. Press freedom vanished. Elections became meaningless. Italy had become a dictatorship. But Mussolini wanted more than control over Italy. He dreamed of rebuilding the glory of the ancient Roman Empire. He wanted Italy to become feared again. And dictators rarely stay satisfied with internal control alone. Soon, Mussolini turned toward conquest. In 1935, Italy invaded Ethiopia. At the time, Ethiopia was one of the few independent African nations not controlled by European colonial powers. The invasion was brutal. Italian forces used bombs, chemical weapons, and overwhelming military force against Ethiopian fighters and civilians. Thousands died, but despite international criticism, Mussolini celebrated the invasion as proof that Italy was becoming powerful again. And many Italians cheered him. This success boosted his ego massively. He now believed he was destined for greatness. Around this same time, another dictator was rising in Germany, Adolf Hitler. At first, Mussolini actually looked down on Hitler. He considered him inexperienced and reckless. But eventually, the two men became close allies. Hitler admired Mussolini deeply. In many ways, Mussolini inspired Hitler's rise to power. The dramatic speeches, the propaganda, the cult of personality, the violent nationalism. Hitler studied all of it. And as Germany grew stronger, Mussolini became increasingly tied to Nazi Germany. This alliance would destroy him. During the late 1930s, Mussolini's dictatorship became more extreme. He adopted racist laws influenced by Nazi ideology. Jewish Italians faced discrimination. Political repression intensified. Meanwhile, Italy's military was nowhere near as powerful as Mussolini pretended. That was the problem with propaganda. When a government spends years pretending to be invincible, eventually reality arrives. And reality arrived with World War II. When the war began in 1939, Mussolini initially hesitated. Italy was not prepared. The economy was weak. The military lacked equipment. Soldiers were poorly trained. But Mussolini feared looking weak beside Hitler. So in 1940, he entered the war on Germany's side. It was a catastrophic decision. Italian military campaigns failed repeatedly. In Greece, Italy struggled badly. In North Africa, Italian forces suffered humiliating defeats. Supplies ran low. Morale collapsed. The image of Mussolini as a genius leader began falling apart. Ordinary Italians were starving. Cities were bombed. Families lost loved ones. And for the first time, many Italians started asking a dangerous question. Was Mussolini actually destroying the country instead of saving it? Meanwhile, Hitler began treating Mussolini less like an equal ally and more like a burden. Germany repeatedly had to rescue Italian military failures. Mussolini's confidence also started collapsing.
The once energetic dictator now appeared tired, sick, and emotionally broken. Then came 1943, the turning point. Allied forces invaded Sicily. Suddenly, the war was no longer distant. Italy itself was under attack. Inside the Italian government, support for Mussolini evaporated. The same elites who once praised him now feared he would drag the entire country into destruction. And finally, after more than 20 years in power, Mussolini was removed from office. Even the king turned against him. He was arrested immediately after meeting the king. Imagine that moment. One day you're the most powerful man in Italy. Crowds salute you. Your image covers the nation. The next day, you're under arrest. But the story doesn't end there, because Hitler refused to let Mussolini disappear. In one of the most dramatic rescue missions of World War II, German commandos stormed the mountain hotel where Mussolini was imprisoned and rescued him. Hitler then placed Mussolini in charge of a puppet state in northern Italy controlled by Nazi Germany. But by this point, Mussolini was no longer the confident dictator from the 1920s. He looked exhausted, defeated, almost hollow. He knew the war was collapsing, and Italy itself had become a battlefield filled with chaos, resistance fighters, bombings, and revenge killings. As Nazi Germany crumbled in 1945, Mussolini attempted to flee Italy. He disguised himself and tried escaping alongside German soldiers. But he was recognized by Italian partisans, captured, and then everything ended. On April 28, 1945, Benito Mussolini and his mistress, Clara Petacci, were executed. But what happened afterward shocked the world. Their bodies were transported to Milan and hung upside down in a public square. Crowds gathered. People insulted the corpse. Some threw objects. Others celebrated. The man who once demanded absolute loyalty and worship ended his life publicly humiliated. And only 2 days later, Adolf Hitler would commit suicide in Berlin.
The fascist dream that once terrified Europe was collapsing into ruins. But here's the important question. How did Mussolini rise in the first place? Because history doesn't just happen randomly. Mussolini rose because people were desperate, because the economy was broken, because fear and anger were everywhere, because many people believed democracy was too weak to solve their problems, and perhaps most importantly, because millions underestimated him. Some thought they could control him. Others believed he would calm down once in office. Many ignored the violence because it targeted people they disliked, until it was too late. That's one of the biggest lessons from Mussolini's story. Dictators rarely arrive saying, "I want to destroy freedom." Instead, they often promise strength, security, national pride, economic recovery. And when populations are desperate enough, those promises can become extremely powerful. Mussolini also understood something many leaders still understand today. People are emotional. If you can control fear, anger, hope, and identity, you can influence entire nations. That's why propaganda was central to his rule. He didn't just want Italians to obey him. He wanted them to believe in him emotionally. And for years, many did. But propaganda cannot permanently hide reality. Eventually, war exposed the truth. The military weakness, the economic failures, the corruption, the lies. And once fear disappeared, his empire collapsed incredibly fast. Today, Mussolini remains one of the most infamous dictators in modern history. His rise influenced authoritarian movements across Europe. His alliance with Hitler helped push the world deeper into catastrophe. And his downfall became one of history's clearest warnings about unchecked power. Because history has shown something repeatedly. A nation in crisis can either strengthen democracy or abandon it out of fear. And sometimes, the consequences can change the world forever. And tell me in the comments, do you think Mussolini could have risen to power without the chaos after World War I? Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.